August 6, 1944. Normandy. Dawn breaks over the French bocage, but the air is heavy with the smell of diesel and cordite. The ground trembles. Hundreds of engines growl in unison, their sound carrying across the hedgerows like the approach of a storm. German forward observers peering through binoculars expect to see the cautious probing of an inexperienced foe. Instead, they witness a wall of steel surging forward, columns of Shermans, half-tracks and artillery rolling as one, supported by air power that claws at the horizon. Radios crackle in every vehicle, every squad leader connected, every unit synchronized. This is no hesitant advance. It is a hammer blow. And it belongs to General George S. Patton's newly unleashed Third Army. U.S. Army After-Action Report. August 1944. For weeks, German generals had mocked the Americans as amateurs in the art of war. Wehrmacht officers, veterans of campaigns from Poland to the steppes of Russia, dismissed U.S. troops as clumsy, dependent on material rather than skill. Field Marshal Günther von Kluge reportedly scoffed at their ability to maneuver under fire, describing them as a blunt instrument wielded by a hesitant hand. Bundesarchiv. Officer Memorandum, July 1944. Even Hitler himself, briefed on Allied movements after the landings in Normandy, sneered at what he called cowboy generals playing soldier. They expected delays. They expected confusion. What they got instead was speed. Ruthless, coordinated, unrelenting speed. Patton had been waiting. His armored formations, freshly activated on August 1st, poured through the gap at Avranches with the fury of a tidal wave breaking through a dam. At the head of it rode the 4th Armored Division, commanded by Major General John S. Wood, its Shermans grinding forward, their 75mm guns barking through the morning haze. Infantry clung to the sides of tanks, advancing faster than German staffs believed possible. What stunned the enemy was not just the number of vehicles, but their cohesion. Entire regiments wheeled, pivoted and struck in perfect rhythm, as if guided by a single mind. Third Army G3 Journal, August 1944. By August the 7th, the German 7th Army, already battered by weeks of Allied bombing, faced an unexpected nightmare. The Americans were no longer bogged down in hedgerow country. They were in the open, moving with terrifying momentum. Convoys of German supply trucks were torn apart on country roads, strafed from the skies by P-47 Thunderbolts, flying close support. Panzer divisions, once the terror of Europe, struggled to redeploy. Many found themselves encircled, cut off before their commanders could even comprehend the scope of the advance. The Wehrmacht's own after-action reports described American maneuvers as fluid, rapid and beyond anticipation. Bundesarchiv. 7th Army KTB, August 1944. Behind the armored spearheads came the full weight of the Third Army, over 250,000 men, organized into 4 corps, with logistical support that dwarfed anything the Germans could field in France. Over 1,500 tanks, thousands of trucks and artillery batteries capable of firing tens of thousands of shells daily, rolled forward with mechanical inevitability. It was war conducted like industry, machines feeding machines, the tempo dictated not by hesitation, but by a relentless will to press forward. U.S. Army Quartermaster Report 1945, and yet in German dugouts and command posts, disbelief hardened into panic. Reports flooded in, entire regiments bypassed, bridges captured intact, towns falling without warning. A composite account from a German staff officer described the sensation vividly. The Americans did not come at us in waves. They came like water finding cracks in a wall. By the time we turned to face one column, 3 more had already poured through. Dramatized composite, based on German POW interrogations, August 1944. Patton's doctrine was clear. Speed was armor. Momentum was protection. The Third Army would never stop moving long enough to give the enemy time to regroup. His tanks thundered across Brittany, seizing Rennes, then racing toward Le Mans and Chartres. Bridges were seized by surprise, often by reconnaissance troops who outran orders, acting with initiative Patton demanded. What stunned the Germans most was not just the advance itself, but its coordination. Artillery, armor, and air power moved in concert. Fire missions were called in within minutes, not hours. German counterattacks were shredded before they could gain traction. U.S. Army Artillery Survey 1944. For the German generals who had once laughed at American inexperience, the reality was undeniable. What they faced was not a hesitant adversary, but an army transformed. American units maneuvered with the kind of synchronization the Wehrmacht had once prided itself on. Radios in every platoon, trucks delivering fuel and ammunition across newly laid supply routes, aircraft orbiting above waiting for calls, all of it knit together into a war machine, unlike anything the Germans had yet encountered. Signal Corps' evaluation report, AUG 1944. And yet in these opening days, the full secret of this machine remained invisible to most observers. German field reports spoke of overwhelming numbers or impossible mobility, but they misdiagnosed the root cause. They thought the Americans had simply brought more tanks, more trucks, more planes. The truth was subtler and far more dangerous. A hidden advantage humming quietly through the air, carried in signals, circuits, and voices. It was this advantage, not merely steel or manpower, that allowed Patton's army to fight as one organism, to strike faster than an opponent could react, to turn mocked inexperience into devastating mastery. U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey 1946. In the smoke of villages reduced to rubble, in the glare of tank columns stretching to the horizon, the German officer corps realized too late that something fundamental had shifted. The Allies had not just matched their tactics, they had surpassed them, fusing industrial might with battlefield command in a way the Wehrmacht had no answer for. The mocking laughter of early July turned into grim silence by mid-August, as the Third Army surged deeper into France, an unstoppable torrent guided by an unseen hand. But what was that hand? What invisible force bound Patton's tanks and infantry into a single striking blade, cutting faster and deeper than even he had dared to promise? As the dust settled over the fields of Normandy, the answer was still obscured in static, hidden in the crackle of unseen transmissions. The truth would only be revealed in the battles yet to come, and it would redefine modern war. August 12, 1944. The village of Argentan lies under a sky streaked with contrails. Dust and exhaust choke the air as American armored columns surge forward, their progress relentless, their movements impossibly precise. German commanders scramble, convinced they are witnessing a nightmare of endless tanks and aircraft. But what they cannot see is the invisible thread stitching Patton's army together. It is not just steel or numbers or even courage. It is communication, the voice carried through static. The unseen web of radios, signals, and relays that turn disparate divisions into a single living organism. Signal Corps' after-action report, AUG 1944. For the Wehrmacht, battlefield communication was still often bound to runners, field telephones, and rigid chains of command. A company commander waiting for artillery support might see hours pass before shells arrived. In contrast, Patton's Third Army thrived on instant connectivity. Every Sherman tank carried an SCR 508 radio, its whip antenna cutting the air. Platoon leaders barked coordinates. Artillery units received them within moments. A pilot overhead heard the same transmission and swooped to strike the target. A whole cycle of war that once took hours compressed into minutes. Technical Manual TM 11275, 1943. The SCR 300, known as the walkie-talkie, became the beating heart of infantry maneuver. Designed by Motorola's engineer Donald Hings and refined by Henrik Magnuski, it was a marvel of portability. A 35-pound backpack set that could transmit up to 3 miles, powered by vacuum tubes ruggedized for the field. Infantry squads, once blind and isolated in the chaos of battle, now spoke directly with tanks, artillery, and command posts. It was a revolution in coordination, giving ordinary riflemen a voice in the wider orchestra of war. U.S. Army Signal Corps Bulletin 1944. Even the Germans recognized the leap. A captured officer's report described the experience bitterly. The Americans swim in radios. Their tanks, their trucks, their very soldiers carry them. Our divisions are blind in comparison, dramatized composite, based on German POW interrogations 1945. In truth, German tank crews often operated with only the commander's vehicle fitted with a proper radio, leaving others to rely on hand signals or shouted commands amid the roar of battle. Against an adversary that spoke instantly across miles, such methods were archaic. Patton exploited this edge mercilessly. Orders that once crawled down a chain of command now flowed like electricity through copper wire. His corps commanders, men like Walton Walker of XX Corps and Manton Eddy of 13th Corps, received real-time updates as their units advanced. Quai Bridge unexpectedly seized, a German column sighted, a fuel dump captured. Each report pulsed through the network, reshaping plans by the minute. It was not just speed of tanks, but speed of thought, the acceleration of decision cycles that overwhelmed the enemy. 3rd Army G3 Journal, Aug. 1944. But communication alone was useless without fuel, and here too the Americans turned innovation into advantage. Patton's advance consumed gasoline at a rate exceeding 350,000 gallons a day. Engineers from the Quartermaster Corps devised rolling supply systems, truck convoys snaking along newly charted Red Ball Express routes, radios coordinating every leg. At the peak, one truck passed every 15 seconds, 24 hours a day, sustaining the momentum that shocked German staffs. Without radios, the lifeline would have collapsed. With them, the Third Army kept moving like an engine, fed by a constant stream of oil. Quartermaster Logistics Report, Sept. 1944. Nowhere did this hidden advantage shine brighter than during the Battle of the Falaise Pocket. From August 12th to 21st, the Allies sought to encircle Germany's 7th Army and 5th Panzer Army as they reeled back from Normandy. Patton's Third Army pushed north, Montgomery's forces struck south, and the jaws of the trap began to close. But in war, timing is everything, and radios gave Patton timing no staff map could guarantee. U.S. Army Operations Report, Aug. 1944. On August 14th, near Le Mans, reconnaissance units of the 80th Infantry Division reported columns of German vehicles fleeing east. Their calls, transmitted via SCR-300, reached 13th Corps headquarters within minutes. Orders rippled out instantly, cut the escape routes. Artillery batteries reoriented. Fighter bombers of the 9th Air Force, already orbiting overhead, received vectors and tore into the convoys. Within an hour, entire German regiments were shattered on the march, their withdrawal paths clogged with burning wreckage. 9th Air Force Combat Report, Aug. 1944. The most decisive moment came at Chambois, where American, Canadian and Polish forces linked to seal the pocket. German units fought with desperation, clawing to escape, but every attempt was smothered by fire called in through radios. American forward observers whispered coordinates into handsets, as if speaking death itself. Artillery shells crashed down within minutes. Tanks maneuvered to cut escape routes. Airstrikes slammed into the congested roads. Survivors described the horror. Every movement was seen. Every attempt to flee destroyed almost instantly. Bundesarchiv, German Officer Diary, Aug. 1944. Patton's use of communication turned what could have been a battle of attrition into a slaughter. By August 21st, as the trap fully closed, up to 50,000 German troops lay captured, their equipment abandoned across the fields of Normandy. Some 10,000 lay dead, their armored columns annihilated in a storm of steel and fire. A Wehrmacht after-action account admitted in despair. They always knew where we were. They struck before we could breathe. Bundesarchiv, 7 Armee KTB, Aug. 1944. The technical specifications of this invisible edge were humble by modern standards, yet in 1944 they were transformative. The SCR-508 tank radio offered frequency range between 20.0 and 27.9 MHz, with a practical range of 5 miles, enough for platoon and company coordination. The SCR-300, though bulky, gave infantry flexible reach on frequencies from 40.0 to 48.0 MHz. Powered by BA-70 batteries, its operators became the nervous system of the battlefield. Engineers at the Galvin Manufacturing Corporation, later Motorola, produced them in tens of thousands, shipping crates of radios alongside rations and ammunition. Technical Manual TM 11275, 1943. Factories in Chicago, Detroit and Newark became as vital to Patton's success as his armored divisions. Workers soldered circuits, tested vacuum tubes, and assembled sets by the hour. Every technician who checked a frequency alignment, every engineer who refined antenna tuning, played a role in the battles across France. War was not just fought at the front. It was engineered in laboratories and assembly lines. U.S. War Production Board Report 1944. For the Germans, this advantage was maddening. Panzer divisions trained to maneuver as flexible Kampfgruppen found themselves lumbering and slow when compared to American coordination. One captured German captain described the experience with bitter frustration. Our tanks fought as lions, but alone. Theirs fought as packs of wolves, each hearing the other's call. Dramatized composite. POW interrogation Sept 1944. The very doctrine that had once made Blitzkrieg unstoppable had been surpassed. And yet Patton never allowed his men to believe the radios made them invincible. Breakdowns were constant. Tubes burned out, batteries drained, antennae snapped under branches. Signal companies labored ceaselessly to repair and maintain the network, laying wire, erecting relay stations, and fixing sets under fire. The advantage lived not just in invention, but in the grit of technicians crawling through mud to keep connections alive. Signal Corps Field Report, Aug. 1944. By late August, the Third Army had advanced nearly 400 miles in just 26 days, a pace unseen in modern warfare. Town after town fell, bridges seized, German morale crumbling with every step. The Falaise Pocket had proven the devastating marriage of armor and communication, of industrial invention and battlefield execution. For the men trapped in that cauldron of fire, it was not just the thunder of shells or the roar of tanks that broke them. It was the terrifying realization that the enemy always seemed to be one step ahead, as if guided by an unseen eye. U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey 1946, and for Patton the lesson was clear. The true weapon of war was not merely the tank, nor the gun, nor even the soldier. It was the ability to bind them all together into a single responsive whole. The Germans had mocked American inexperience, but in the Falaise fields, in the smoking ruins of shattered convoys, they saw the truth. The Americans had forged a new kind of warfare, one that would carry Patton's banners all the way to the Rhine. But the story does not end at the pocket. The question remains, what did this hidden advantage mean for the long war ahead? Beyond the battles and the maps, what did radios and coordination do to the minds of soldiers, both those who wielded the power and those crushed beneath it? The answer would shape campaigns across Europe, redefine strategy, and echo into the Cold War September 1944. The fields of France, once torn by hedgerows and fire, now lie behind Patton's Third Army. His men, weary but unbroken, march eastward with the confidence of victors. The Falaise Pocket has been sealed, tens of thousands of Germans killed or captured, and the enemy's faith in their invincibility shattered. Yet the true impact of this triumph cannot be measured only in prisoners or wrecked vehicles. It lies in something deeper, the psychological collapse of an enemy confronted not merely by superior firepower, but by a new way of waging war. U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey 1946. German interrogations conducted after the Pocket revealed the despair of officers who had once mocked American clumsiness. Many admitted they could no longer predict Allied moves. A colonel from the 7th Army captured near Chambois lamented, "Every counterattack failed before it began. We thought them amateurs, but they fought as one body faster than we could think." Dramatized composite, POW interrogation, Aug. 1944. This was the essence of the Third Army's hidden edge. Radios and coordination created tempo, and tempo created shock. For soldiers trained to expect dominance through blitzkrieg, the realization was devastating. The hunters had become the hunted. Patton understood the psychological value of momentum. He drove his men to press forward, often demanding marches of 40 or 50 miles in a single day. Infantry trudged in sweat-soaked uniforms, tank crews catnapped in turrets as convoys roared east. But the knowledge that every unit was connected, that artillery and air support were only a call away, stiffened their resolve. Veterans of the Third Army remembered the comfort of that invisible shield. "You felt you weren't alone," one GI wrote in his diary. "Somewhere in the static was a voice that could save you." Private Journal 1944. For the Germans, the opposite was true. Units cut off from their commands felt abandoned, their radios jammed or absent, their lines of communication shattered by bombing. In the chaos of retreat, confusion bred fear. Morale withered not just under fire but in silence, when orders never arrived and reinforcements never came. The U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey later noted that German collapse in Normandy owed as much to psychological disintegration as to material losses. The Wehrmacht had faced defeat before, but never had they been outpaced in command and coordination so utterly. U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey 1946. This edge was not free. Behind Patton's rapid thrusts lay the ceaseless toil of signalmen, mechanics, and engineers. The Signal Corps laid miles of wire daily, maintained switchboards, and repaired battered sets. Quartermaster drivers risked Luftwaffe strafing to deliver gasoline and spare tubes for SCR 300s. In workshops across France, technicians soldered connections, retuned frequencies, and kept the fragile lifeline alive. War was not won only by the men firing rifles, but by those bent over circuit boards in the glow of lantern light. Signal Corps Field Report Sept 1944. The industrial base of America also bore the weight. Factories in Chicago, Philadelphia, and Newark produced over 150,000 backpack radios and tens of thousands of tank sets between 1943 and 1945. Engineers like Henrik Magnuski and Donald Hings never stood on the front lines, yet their inventions altered the fate of nations. Each radio set that left an assembly line carried within it the potential to save a platoon, to capture a bridge, to annihilate a column. War Production Board Report 1945. The strategic consequences of this advantage were immense. In just a single month, Patton's army advanced farther than most German generals believed possible in a year. By late September, the Third Army stood at the Moselle River, threatening the Siegfried Line itself. German high command reeled, forced to shift divisions from other fronts to contain the breach. Every day the Americans kept moving, strained the Reich's crumbling logistics further. Allied commanders like Eisenhower recognized the Third Army as a spearhead of momentum that pinned German attention while other armies secured northern France and Belgium. Shape Headquarters Report, Sept 1944. Yet radios and speed did more than shift campaigns. They reshaped doctrine. The concept of combined arms, infantry, armor, artillery, and air power striking in harmony, found its fullest expression under Patton, enabled by constant communication. The Third Army's operations became a model for future warfare. Decisions made in hours instead of days, attacks coordinated across miles of terrain with precision. In this way, Normandy and the Falaise Pocket became laboratories for modern command and control, the foundation of what would one day be called network-centric warfare. U.S. Army Command Review 1947. The Germans, in post-war assessments, admitted their own failure. Officers interviewed by Allied teams confessed that their rigid systems had collapsed in the face of American flexibility. They fought with machines, yes, one general stated, but more dangerous was that they thought with machines. Their decisions moved as fast as their engines. Dramatized composite. U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey 1946. For an army bred on the myth of Auftragstactik, mission-type orders and initiative, the irony was bitter. Their own doctrine had been surpassed by an enemy they had dismissed as tactically naive. The human cost remained enormous. Patton's relentless drive took lives as surely as it took ground. Men of the 4th Armored Division fought day and night, sometimes without rest for 72 hours. Infantry of the 80th Division marched blistered and exhausted, often with no time to bury the dead. Radios could shorten battles, but they could not soften them. Soldiers still faced machine gun fire, mines, and artillery barrages. The advance exacted its toll in blood and nerves. Yet within that hardship lay pride, the belief that their sacrifices were part of a machine greater than themselves, that every life risked moved the whole forward. Third Army Medical Corps Report 1944. As the war ground on into the autumn, the legacy of this hidden advantage deepened. At the Battle of the Bulge in December, when German forces launched their last great counteroffensive, it was the rapid communication of American units that blunted the thrust. Radios once more became lifelines, calling reinforcements to Bastogne, guiding air power through winter skies and preventing chaos from becoming collapse. The very tool that had carried Patton across France now held the line against Germany's final gamble. First Army After Action Report, DEC 1944. After the war, the lessons were codified. The U.S. Army invested heavily in communications research, recognizing that victory had been secured not only by tanks and rifles, but by the invisible voice across the airwaves. Korea, Vietnam, and Desert Storm all bore the imprint of Patton's campaigns. Portable radios became standard, satellite networks later extended the reach, and the concept of real-time coordination became doctrine. From Normandy to Baghdad, the ghost of the SCR-300 walked with American soldiers. U.S. Army Signal Corps Historical Study, 1951. For the German officers who survived captivity, reflection was bitter. Many admitted that they had underestimated America's ability not just to produce machines, but to wield them intelligently. One general in post-war interrogation remarked, "We laughed at their inexperience. We stopped laughing at Falaise, dramatized composite." U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey, 1946. The arrogance of early 1944 gave way to the recognition that America had mastered industrial warfare, not only in quantity, but in quality. And for the men of Patton's Third Army, the memory endured. Veterans spoke not only of battles and marches, but of the voices that carried through static in their darkest moments. In memoirs and letters, they recalled the crackle of the radio as reassurance, as guidance, as the sound of an army that never abandoned them. It was technology made human, a bond that outlasted the war. Veterans Oral History Project, 1999. The legacy of the Third Army was not just victory in France, but a transformation of war itself. The mocking of German generals had turned to awe and fear. A new era had begun, one in which the battlefield was not merely contested with tanks and guns, but with networks of information, speed of thought, and the synchronization of many into one. The thunder of Patton's advance echoed into the future, a warning and a promise. As Patton himself declared in his own words, "In war, it is not the man with the most guns who wins, but the man who can make them all fire at once." Patton, Speech to Third Army, 1944. And so the lesson endures. In modern war, connection outweighs firepower, and speed defeats armor.